They say no storm lasts forever, but what if the storm is not just outside, it's within? And what if, in the heart of that storm, you had to face the one person you never thought you could forgive? This is the story of a man, a storm, and a choice that would ripple through generations. But let me ask you this before we begin. Could you save your enemy if it meant risking everything? In a small, remote village, nestled in the shadow of towering pine trees and sprawling mountains, lived Awan, an indigenous craftsman. Known for his intricate carvings and deep connection to the land, Awan was a quiet, observant soul. Life in the village was simple but deeply meaningful. Every morning, Awan gathered wood from the forest, spoke prayers to the earth, and honored the spirits of his ancestors. But Awan carried a wound, one that no ritual or time could heal. His family's land had been stolen years ago by settlers, led by a man named Gerald Hawkins. The Hawkins family had built a ranch on what once was Awan's ancestral home. Though the village elders taught forgiveness, Awan's heart burned with resentment. One crisp autumn morning, as Awan worked on a cedar carving by the river, dark clouds began to gather. The storm warnings had been ignored. Storms came and went in this part of the world. But this one was different. It was ferocious, relentless, and heading straight for the village. As the storm approached, Awan's instinct told him to return home. He gathered his tools and began the trek back through the forest. The wind howled and rain lashed at his face. On his way, he saw something unusual. A horse tied to a tree, abandoned but saddled. A few steps further, he found a man lying unconscious in the mud, blood trickling from his forehead. It was Gerald Hawkins. Awan froze. His breath quickened as he recognized the man who had caused his family so much pain. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to walk away, but the storm was growing fiercer, and leaving Hawkins there meant certain death. This man took everything from me. Why should I save him? Awan thought. Yet something deeper, a quiet whisper from his soul, urged him to act. What would you do? Would you leave him there and walk away? Or would you do the unthinkable? Awan gritted his teeth and lifted Gerald onto his shoulders. Every step through the forest felt like a battle against the wind and his own emotions. When he finally reached his modest cabin, Awan laid Gerald on the floor by the fire. Gerald stirred, grunting in pain. When he opened his eyes and saw Awan, a flicker of fear crossed his face. You're him, Gerald murmured. Awan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Instead, he cleaned the wound on Gerald's head and offered him water. Gerald hesitated but drank. The storm outside was unforgiving, and Awan knew they were trapped together, at least for now. The days crawled by and the storm showed no signs of letting up. The relentless pounding of rain and howling wind outside mirrored the tempest inside Awan's mind. Memories of his family's displacement haunted him. His father's quiet despair, his mother's tears, the helplessness of watching his world taken from him. Isn't it strange how proximity can change perspective? What happens when the enemy is no longer a distant figure, but a flesh and blood human being right in front of you? On the second night, as the fire crackled softly, Gerald broke the silence. I didn't know what we were taking when we built that ranch, he said, his voice barely audible. I was young and foolish, just following orders. I've regretted it ever since. Awan's hands trembled as he listened. For years, he had built a narrative in his mind where Gerald was the villain. But now, hearing the man's remorse, Awan felt the heavy weight of his own bitterness. The storm's fury peaked on the third night. The roof of Awan's cabin groaned under the weight of the relentless wind and rain. The river near his home began to swell dangerously. Awan knew they couldn't stay. He fashioned a makeshift raft and prepared to navigate the raging waters. We need to leave now, Awan said firmly, helping Gerald to his feet. As they floated down the river, disaster struck. A fallen tree blocked their path, and the raft capsized. Awan managed to cling to a branch, but Gerald was swept away. The icy water roared around them, and panic gripped Awan's chest. Was this fate? Was this Awan's chance to let go, to let the storm take Gerald and be free of the burden of forgiveness? But then, without hesitation, Awan plunged into the freezing water. He fought against the current, his muscles burning with the effort. He reached Gerald, who was barely conscious, and pulled him to the shore. Both men collapsed, gasping for air. In that moment, something shifted in Awan. Saving Gerald wasn't about absolving him of his sins. It was about freeing himself from the chains of hatred. "You're alive because no one deserves to die alone," Awan said, his voice steady. Gerald nodded, tears streaming down his face. When the storm finally passed, Awan guided Gerald back to the village. Word of what had happened spread quickly. Some villagers criticized Awan for helping a man like Gerald, but others saw it as a profound act of courage and compassion. Gerald returned to his ranch, but he didn't forget what Awan had done. Weeks later, he appeared at the village with an offer to return the land to Awan's people. Though the gesture couldn't erase the past, it was a step toward healing. Awan was hesitant at first. He'd lived so long in the shadow of anger and loss that accepting the land felt like an impossible task. But with the support of his community, he took the first steps toward reclaiming his heritage. Awan's life didn't change overnight. The scars of the past remained, but he felt lighter, as if the storm had swept away not just debris, but also the darkness within him. He began to teach younger villagers the art of carving, using wood from the very trees that had sheltered him during the storm. What about you? Is there a storm in your life that's waiting to pass? A hatred you're holding on to that's holding you back? Years later, when Awan's story was told around village fires, it wasn't just about a man who saved his enemy. It was about the power of forgiveness, not for others, but for oneself. It became a lesson passed down to generations. Forgiveness is not a gift to the forgiven. It is a gift to the forgiver. And so, the storm ended. But its lessons remain. If you found this story moving, take a moment to share it with someone who might need it. And remember, sometimes the greatest battles we fight are the ones within. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and stay hopeful.